This episode is brought to you by WeatherGuard Lightning Tech. At WeatherGuard, we make wind turbine lightning protection easy. If you're a wind farm operator, stop settling for damaged turbine blades and constant downtime. Get your uptime back with our Strike Tape lightning protection system. Learn more in today's show notes or visit weatherguardwind.com/striketape.
Welcome back. I'm Alan Hall.
I'm Dan Blewett, and this is the Uptime Podcast, where we talk about wind energy, engineering, lightning protection, and ways to keep your wind turbines running. All right, welcome back. This is the Uptime Podcast. This is episode 19. I'm your co-host, Dan Blewett. And in today's episode, we're going to cover a bunch of different news-related topics in wind energy. So first, New York has released some recent solicitation for 2.5 gigawatts of wind power to be located somewhere offshore, which is pretty exciting. We're going to talk about a little bit about ways where people are actually still getting struck by lightning, which is scary to think about, and self-driving cars, all sorts of stuff. Alan, you can't laugh yet. I haven't introduced you, all right? And then the UK has cleared a path for some giant batteries to store some of this solar energy and wind power energy, which is also something that's, the battery potential in this sector is pretty exciting for the future. I mean, we don't think about homes being able to be powered by batteries in businesses, but that might be reality pretty soon. We'll talk a little bit about lightning strikes and how incredible the number of daily lightning strikes there are all throughout the world. I mean, 8 million a day, essentially. And then lastly, we're going to hear some of Alan's takeaways from the Dallas virtual wind seminar, the wind operations from this past week. So, Alan, heard you over there. How are you today?
Yeah, lightning strikes to people are really serious, and you always cringe when you hear that because there's so many ways to avoid them today. And in some parts of the world, it's a little harder than others, but you still read about it. It's a very common event. It's not zero, and it's not thousands, but it's somewhere in between. And gotten better over time. But I did attend a number of the Wind Operations Dallas virtual conference that Reuters Events had going this past week, and that was really interesting. I got a lot of new insight into the industry, in particular the monitoring that happens and all the technology that's evolved around it, and performance, and how the performance of the turbines is monitored, and how it's interpreted, and how they try to maximize the full power, essentially full power of generators. It was interesting.
Yeah, so Wind Operations Dallas is a yearly conference. This year they went virtual, obviously. So they claim to have 2,500 virtual attendees, which is pretty good. And it's mainly for asset owners and operators and looking for just insights into wind O&M. So any particular takeaways, any topics that really grabbed your attention?
It's actually the last presentation, though there were a lot of good presentations, and I watched some on drones. I've watched one with essentially technicians talking about the different things that they go through and how difficult that is, and in all the remote areas of the world they have to go work in, and how difficult it is to communicate to the outside world what's happening, which is totally true. And then the last one was regarding the efficiency of wind turbines. And you and I had talked about this previously, but the one of the authors of the paper was talking about the decrease in efficiency of wind turbines over time in the United States, and comparing that a little bit to the efficiency of wind turbines in different places in Europe. It essentially goes like this, roughly. Now I'm going to speak in rough terms here. That the efficiency of the wind turbine goes down about 1% per year. And newer wind turbines, maybe a little bit less, but that the wind turbines are using larger and larger blades, even though the towers haven't gone up. So the ability for the wind turbines to generate power at low winds is going up substantially. So they get to the max rated power sooner, and they stay at max rated power. But in order to do that, the tip speeds have to go up. And when the tip speeds go up, they're having other issues. And the size of the blade goes up, there's just more load that they have to deal with because the weight of the blades goes up. But the 1% decrease per year happens every year until they get to the 10th year. And in the United States, the production tax credits drop off. And what you see is a much more steeper increase in the inefficiency. So there's like another, like almost like a 2% drop at year 10, 11, and 12 is somewhere in there. Like the operators decide they're not going to, because they're not getting the tax credit, or don't have the money to maintain the turbines. And so they essentially reduce the amount of turbine maintenance, which increases the inefficiency. And in other countries, that's not the case. The inefficiency kind of takes that gradual turn down. I just thought that was interesting because if we're really serious about this industry long term, first off, the roughly 1% decrease per year is not good. So at the end of roughly 20 years, the efficiency is like 85%. So it's not exactly 1% a year, but roughly. Mm-hmm. So you've lost 15% of the efficiency of the turbine. That's a big loss. And at some point, you have to say, well, is it worth running this thing anymore? Maybe not. Or what things can we do to keep them running more efficiently? That, I think, is the bigger issue. It seems like the leading edge erosion and blade efficiency in the air is a big issue. It doesn't seem like there's many structural issues. Lightning is obviously one of them because it's going to screw up your aerodynamics. If you have a lightning damage to the surface of the blade, it's going to screw up the aerodynamics, it's going to make the blade inefficient again. So you're going to see a lot more based on those numbers. It makes a lot of sense then for what we're seeing is a lot of emphasis on fixing the leading edge erosion. And when we talked to Danny Ellis at SkySpecs, he was saying that pretty much every blade in the world has some sort of leading edge erosion, and it's a big maintenance task. But that's going to need to get fixed if we're going to maintain the efficiency. Obviously, getting the lightning protection right is going to increase the efficiency. And it just seems like as an industry, now that we have that data, we need to act upon it and make the wind turbine efficiency stabilize. At some point, you'd think it would stabilize, but it doesn't. It's kind of like buying a car. It gets a little more efficient because the bearings wear down and that kind of thing. But on a car, you would try to improve that, and especially on an electric vehicle, you would try to not have those decreases. If you lose 15% efficiency in the sort of the mechanics of an automobile, I think you'd be concerned about it. But for some reason,
I heard they lose a 1% of fuel efficiency per year for cars. And that's one of the arguments, there's arguments for or against owning versus leasing a car. And one of the arguments against ownership is that you lose 1% a year in fuel efficiency every year that you own it.
Is that due to degradation in the motor, or is it just wheel bearings? Because
I'm not exactly sure. Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of it in a car is rolling resistance has a lot to do with inefficiency. So buying cheaper tires probably increases your rolling resistance, and obviously the transmissions aren't as efficient. But unlike an electric car, on a gas powered car, you probably wouldn't notice it all that much. On an electric vehicle, you'll notice it a little bit more. It just seems like we're at a point now where we're roughly 120 plus years into sort of the mechanized age, 140 years into the mechanized age. We would have these things sort of figured out by now, and we don't.
No,
we totally don't. So it's just frustrating to see those numbers thrown up. Like, dang it, are we not making things better? What are we doing? And are we putting the effort in the right places? Because I think as an industry, we've got to do better on the back end. I think everybody will admit that we got to do better on the back end. And the last 10 years, we need to be more efficient and keep the efficiency up of the turbines. And so, vortex generators, leading edge protection, lightning protection improvements are going to be the way of the future. You already see some of the companies making a good bit of effort in those areas, and that is not going to slow down. And the drone inspections are going to go way, way up just because of it.
Well, does the force? So we talked about one of the things we chatted about this week was lightning being deemed a force majeure. As far as not really being covered by insurance and helping with repairs for it. Is this something that needs to change? Is this something that's maybe causing that 1% per year? Are there other factors that are maybe not considered essential as far as the service, O&M contracts go?
Well, I think when you start to put likely events into the acts of nature pile, what it does from the engineering side is like, well, then I don't have to do all that much. If something were to happen, well, it's just out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not out of your control. Again, I go back to, we've been in the 140 plus years of the mechanized age, and we've been, well, Ben Franklin and the lightning rod is 1750s. So that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Can we not figure some of this stuff out and make it more efficient? For whatever reason, we would never allow that to happen on an airplane. Well, because it's full of 200 people, 200, 800 people that would be affected by, some sort of catastrophic lightning strike. But on a wind turbine, it's like, we can't predict it's going to happen, or we have no control over it, or we're just wiping our hands of it, which is the wrong approach. If the industry wants to be here long term and make that sort of impact, then this lightning can't be a force majeure anymore. We need to be designing against it and figure out what's going on out in the field and fix it.
Yeah.
That's the way to move forward.
Well, knowing this much about lightning, there's no way you could say that falls under that extraordinary event or unforeseen. Like, it's clearly foreseen. Like, what else is it going to strike? I mean, these things are on top of mountains and open fields.
Right.
Of course it's going to strike that.
Right. If you make yourself the tallest object within a quarter mile or a mile, you're going to be it. So it's like when they put the Empire State Building up back in the 1920s, whenever that was, and they started to take all these lightning strikes. It was an object of great scientific use because, one, I guess they didn't really think that was going to happen all that much, but actually GE started to instrument the Empire State Building and learned a ton about lightning strikes, and then implemented that into all the power utilities across the United States and the world, for that matter, and how to protect all the other things that are going on in the world because of the data they took from the Empire State Building. Well, we have instrumented thousands of wind turbines at this point, easily. What are we doing with that data, and what are we learning from that data, and are we making the next generation wind turbines better? If we don't have some sort of requirement that says lightning is not a force majeure anymore, that you need to design against it, and lightning strikes are either going to be paid for on insurance, or the OEM manufacturer is going to be responsible to take care of those things, then we're never going to resolve this. And the thing about insurance is, when you have an insurance industry that's managing the finances of this, they have a great deal of impact on what pieces get corrected over time. And if the insurance company is paying out a lot of lightning strike damage claims, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the OEMs to make sure this lightning thing is taken care of. That's what will happen.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about some news. New York issued a second offshore wind solicitation, and this is for up to 2.5 gigawatts of offshore capacity. And it looks like they're going to announce winners of those bids later in 2020. And a lot of people were worried that this was just going to get pushed back because of coronavirus. But it sounds like they kind of said, no, let's get this done. This will add good jobs. And, the state's offering $200 million in funding to do this. And they've kind of, trying to figure out which port is going to make the most sense to get this done in. So what do you think about this proposal out of New York?
Well, I'll believe it when I see it. There's been all kinds in Massachusetts, there's been big struggles with putting wind turbines offshore just because of the value of the properties that are next to the ocean there. I think the same thing exists in New York, quite honestly. Are they going to be able to do that? Maybe. We just got to get over the stigma that wind turbines are ugly, which is what the stigma is, that wind turbines are ugly. I mean, you'll hear people straight up say it. We don't like them. We don't like it. If they're anywhere in the line of sight, they're offhandedly rejected. And I'm not sure that's fair. It's not fair. In New York, in the New York City area, they're trying to shut down one of the nuclear power plants. I think the governor is forcing the closure of it. So they gotta you gotta replace that energy capability with something.
Yeah.
Wind is one of the options. I'm not sure it's the best option in terms of by itself. It's going to be in combination with something else. But I'm based on previous history, it's not going to go all that well, and it's going to be a lot of lawsuits to stop it. And if you can sue to delay it, people will do it. And I just wonder how much gumption the state of New York has. when those lawsuits come up, are they going to deal with them? Are they going to try to negotiate out of them? Or are they going to just kick the can down the road and say, well, we can't do anything about it? Or we got a very powerful senator like we had in Massachusetts, Ted Kennedy, that was totally against the wind turbines from happening because they had a big campus on the ocean and they didn't want to see them. So he's blocked all those from happening. I can totally imagine that happening in New York State too, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, well, at least they're pushing for it. I know people are looking for ways to get it. It's funny that this ties in with one of the relatively tone-deaf things the Trump administration and Ivanka Trump specifically put out recently, this whole like find your new job, right? Find something new. They have this new website and they just list a bunch of jobs that you can't just go out and just start doing. Like wind turbine technician was one they listed. It's like, great job, but like takes a lot of qualifications to do something like that. And there was aerospace engineering technician was one of them. I think they're trying to give people ways to get excited about, new careers, but I think they've done it in a kind of bizarre way that seems like out of touch with reality, but it's
there's
a
a
good
lot of
thing.
jobs in the United States that don't require any college training. And I think there's a huge void there right now. I know in the aircraft industry, there's a lot of job, and even in the wind industry, we know there's a lot of jobs, particularly with welders or technicians, that are just gone filled because there's no one to take those jobs because we have said that college is the only way to have a future or to make a living. That's totally not true. And with the expense of college and all the college debt, and that's a big complaint about all the college debt. Well, you want to avoid all the college debt and still make good money? Put your hands to work. It's not a bad way to go about it. And if there's going to be all these wind turbine jobs, and they are technical, they do take some training, but it's not like 4 years of school and $200,000 worth of debt. Awesome. Go do it. Go do it, because that's a skill you're going to carry with you the rest of your life. If you know how to do electrical work, if you know how to weld, and you know how to use a lathe and to make parts and to do all the things or fix composites for that matter, if you know how to do those things, those skills are totally transferable to other industries, and it makes you it creates that skill stack that your competition doesn't have, and you got those set of skills that are transferable from job to job to job. You'll always have work, so it's not a bad approach. I think everybody's just got to get their head wrapped around that. Maybe college isn't the answer for everybody. In fact, a lot of people that I know that don't have college degrees are doing just fine in the industry they chose.
So let's jump to lightning in general. So July is apparently the least safe month in the U.S. with a fatality every 3 days. And there have been some crazy lightning storms here in D.C. the last couple of days.
Here too.
I've watched the radar roll in, and there's huge splotches of red, which is like the highest on the radar, and just very intense lightning storms. But last night, earlier in the week. So what's different about July, and what do people need to do to protect themselves from this?
Heat. The amount of energy in the storms, which is related to how hot it is outside, and that you're getting these storms built up over time, and then the storms are moving from west to east and building up energy as they come along. So by the time they start to dump all that energy and dump all that rain, there's at the higher, as they get taller and taller inside the storm itself, the water's getting shoved up to the upper atmosphere, turning into ice and then falling back down, and there's friction involved, and that's what generates all the charge for lightning strikes. Here we had a number of strikes this past week that were within a half mile of our house easily. It just flash, boom, instantaneous of light up. And it's serious stuff. And you want to be inside when that's going on, and you need to take it seriously. Obviously, at this time of year, there's a lot of youth sports going on, and that's a big issue. You see soccer players or football players injured all the time around the world as a light pole or something near them gets struck, and the turf that they're walking on is energized, and it'll knock people down. It's serious stuff. So you don't have to get struck directly. The current running through the earth is enough that there's this voltage between your 2 feet, and it's enough, and that's why people get like knocked out of their shoes. There's voltage between their 2 feet, and It is no joke. In fact, I saw this week where the recommendation for that to squat and put your feet together, which has been the recommendation for a long, long time. If you're in the middle of a field and there's no place to go, put your feet together, squat down, and basically decrease the amount of voltage that's going to happen across your body. That's essentially what that does. Now they're saying like people are using it as a first line of defense. Like getting in the car or getting to shelter is not a first line of defense. People are willing to just sit down and squat down and wait it out. And they're getting hurt, not seriously all the time, but it's still a sort of a fool's errand to think that's the right way to go. You definitely want to get inside.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, are cars providing more safety or are they not? I mean, they have rubber tires, but is a car a better place?
Yeah. It is because the bodies are metal, so the lightning energy is running mostly through the metal frame, not through you. And yeah, there are rubber tires, but if you think about it this way, lightning, by the time it gets to the car, has already traveled a couple of miles. To go across your rubber tires, which may be 6 inches, is nothing. Yeah.
Gotcha. So one of the last things to touch on, the UK is kind of a go-ahead now with 100 giant batteries to store energy from both solar power and wind power. What's the main goal here? Is that we can store excess from when turbines are producing more than we need? Doesn't have to go back to the grid? Is that the main goal here?
Right. So if you're making power off hours, you can provide them on hour. So when your peak demand hits, all the energy you stored up over the evening time can be used in the daytime to run air conditioners and lights and all the other things, washing machines, everything else that we're running. So it's a way of more efficiently using the energy all the time and storing all kinds of generated electricity, from gas-fired generators to wind turbines or solar. Well, solar is not doing a lot at nighttime, but mostly wind and gas-fired things. You can store that energy, keep the plants working at their peak efficiency, and then draw that energy out as you need it. And I thought Elon Musk yesterday or the day before made a comment like, because the Tesla stock on the automotive side came out and he had a pretty good quarter. But his comment was the batteries and the large scale batteries is the next big step. That if they can, the car thing's going to happen and it'll go out on its own. But he felt like the next big area for Tesla as an organization was on these large storage batteries, and that to watch that part of the company grow because they're close, really close.
Well, have you seen one of these? It's such a strange technology, but they said it's super efficient. And depending on the terrain, like one of the best methods is these train cars. Have you seen these?
Mm-mm.
So basically in places, and this could be solar, it could be whatever. Whenever there's excess power, there's this like essentially this mini autonomous train station that these electric cars, when there's extra power, it feeds into them, it powers them, they run up a mountain, and then they stay there.
Oh.
And then when they need the power, the trains they've come back down the mountain with gravity, and as they come through, their wheels turning just pumps that electricity back into the grid and on its way. Pretty interesting. Yeah. It just like seems, and they're talking about where they can put these and when it does fit the terrain, that it's like one of the most economical and a very viable, like ready to use now kind of technology. So really curious.
I know we've done it with water.
Form of a battery.
Well, yeah, we've done it with water where we pump water up the hill in the daytime and then pump it back through the turbines to generate power in the evening, or vice versa.
Same
morning,
principle.
night, doesn't matter. Yeah, same principle where you just eventually taking potential energy, turn it into kinetic energy, turn it into potential energy, and then turn it into kinetic energy again. So it's using gravity in your favor.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously it depends where they can do that, but it's interesting. Right. Just, you wouldn't think of that as a battery per se, but I guess it kind of fulfills the same purpose.
Well, that's what a battery is, right? A battery is taking of kinetic energy, so to speak, and turning it into potential energy, storage, and then releasing it. So we do it chemically in batteries, but we can also do it in mechanical things too. It gets down to the efficiency and how difficult it is to maintain those things. The beautiful thing about batteries is it's an inanimate object. There's no moving parts. So as long as you can find a place to store it and it's safe to handle, the battery is the way to go. The mechanical means have other issues because you have to sort of have somebody on site to maintain them, kind of like having a wind turbine. When anything is moving, you've got to have a technician to keep the thing turning. Yeah, but I mean, there's different ways to approach it, and it's not one size fits all. I think that's the key to any of this, is that in some places it may make more sense to use gravity as your storage battery versus spending a bunch of money on the chemical means of storing energy. It just depends on what you have, right? And we shouldn't take anything off the table. If it's applicable in one part of the world, great, use it. That's what it's there for.
Mm-hmm. And so lastly, this report came out that says lightning strikes more than 100 million times a year in the tropics. So does this make wind turbines not viable in those climates? Or like, what do you think with this data?
The data was fascinating because they were looking at the number of lightning strikes that happen in the tropics. So Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer, right? So in that band there, of how many strikes occur in that region and how many trees get struck and how does it affect the forest? And so they started to track how many lightning strikes there were, because it seems like the tallest trees get struck. That was sort of the first observation, like that, hey, the tallest trees get struck. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Kind of like our wind turbines, like the tallest wind turbine gets struck. Surprise, surprise. In fact, the first wind turbine that's in the line of fire of the storm as it approaches is the one that gets struck the most. Surprise, surprise. Same thing happens in the forest. But the indication, it's fascinating because they had calculated or extrapolated out, like in a year, there's like 800 million lightning strikes to trees around the equator. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And they figured like 25% of those led to the death of the trees. So that would be about 200 million plus tree deaths every year around the equator. But they thought that had a lot to do with just the ecology and the nature of re-energizing the forest, those kind of things. But the implication for wind turbines is I think just as directly applicable. If there's 800 million strikes to large, tall objects, i.e. trees, then putting wind turbines around those areas is going to lead to a lot of strikes to wind turbines. And we get back to the force majeure thing. Is lightning strike a force majeure? Is it an act of nature? Well, I guess in a sense that it is, but we should be able to design against it. And it's funny that the naturalists, the scientists that are looking at the way that essentially the rainforests and the tropics regenerate life and take a look at the way trees get struck and what influence that has on the nature of things that's the first one I've really seen where they've started defining how many strikes happen in that region and what the effect is. But golly, that's a lot of lightning strikes.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot of lightning strikes. When I first saw the number, I'm like, wow, that's a lot more than I thought it was. So in today's world, can we not design to handle that? The one thing they did mention was they thought that the trees over time had evolved to be able to withstand most lightning strikes. Like 75% of them live, which doesn't seem possible because every tree I've ever seen struck locally to me dies. That it just doesn't. But maybe there's something about the tropics where it's adapted over time. The trees have adapted over time that it doesn't kill the tree. Wow. Now that's something cool because I have not seen that before, but it does sort of make sense. So there's a lot more research to do there.
But does that fit with natural selection? Because wouldn't that tree have already propagated its genes by the time it got that big? You know what I mean?
Maybe, yeah.
For it to evolve, it would have to be killing trees before they got to pass on their genes. But if you're the oldest tree in the forest and the tallest tree of the forest, and then you get struck, you've already fathered or mothered tons and tons of other trees. Your genes are already spread, even then if you get killed by lightning. I don't know. Does that fit or not fit natural selection? It feels like it doesn't quite fit.
Well, I mean, if you're the tallest tree and lightning doesn't bother you, boy, you're the most powerful tree in the forest.
That's true.
Right? I mean, if you could, so by the choice of sort of a natural selection thing, if you're a big tall tree and you can't take a lightning strike, well, That's pretty much it. So I kind of wonder if they ever get to the fact of what's making these trees live from these lightning strikes. What about those trees is slightly different than the other ones where they don't live? That would be fascinating. That would be fascinating to learn.
Yeah, you wonder if it's like maybe like a more higher moisture content or something where it's like less of it burns or,
Could be the bark. Could be anything. I mean, if the energy is kept on the outside, the problem with a lot of trees that we see around here that get struck is that the energy kind of goes down the center of these things, and that splits them apart.
Burn from the inside.
It burns from the inside, or it just the bark is like that protective skin, and if you remove a protective skin on a tree, it leaves it vulnerable to pests and other things. And so if you blow the bark off a tree, it's not pretty much, because that's where all the moisture is too. It's going to dry up. It's going to die. So it makes you think that there's something magic about either the bark or the way that it moves moisture, or maybe it's the conductivity inside of the tree is changed. It wouldn't have to be much. So I'm gonna follow this. I'm gonna follow this as it goes along, because somebody's gonna get a research project, right? The article is in the Smithsonian, and so if the Smithsonian's highlighted it, I'm sure there's some research grants going to be headed their way, and I just want to keep track of it.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up today's episode of Uptime. If you're new to the show, welcome. If you're a regular here, thank you for your continued support. Please subscribe to the show and leave a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to check out the WeatherGuard Lightning Tech YouTube channel for video episodes, full interviews, and short clips from each show. For Alan and all of us at WeatherGuard, stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Is downtime causing you financial pain and putting a stop to your power production for months on end? It's no secret, lightning strike damage is a major cause of wind turbine downtime. This damage is preventable with our easy-to-install strike tape lightning protection system for wind turbine blades. Our incredible engineering, build quality, materials, and edge sealants withstand up to 5 times more abuse in the toughest weather and lightning conditions. And we've got the research to prove it. If you're tired of constant downtime, we can help. Reach out to us at weatherguardwind.com and schedule a free call. We'll get your uptime back in no time.